thing to put yourself through, and nobody understands what it's like to be put in this situation. I just hope that going into today, the experts, show me grace and compassion, and, they can ask their questions. They can...
Hey guys, welcome to Little Black Book 91. Listen, we're talking to you guys again once more about villains. Yes, we have spoken about Michelle and her villainy, but this time we've got to talk about Madison and David. These two, who were married to their respective partners, decided to step out in different ways. Madison had somebody who actually cared about her, Alan, who was trying throughout the course of the marriage to love her. And David had somebody who rejected him, was contemptuous and critical of him in the relationship. And David and Madison found themselves gravitating towards one another. It begs the question, can people really be faithful in marriage? Well, this is actually not the most conventional marriage aspect, but it's still about integrity. So I'm going to break it all the way down why these two are villains. I'm also going to break down why these two actually cheated, because there's a really deeper aspect we have to go to. We have to talk about boundaries. We have to talk about also the emotional wounds that I heard, especially in this latest episode, has given me the aha moment. I don't know why I did the aha moment as to what was really going on between David and Madison. Like, there is no excuses for cheating. And actually, we have to hold him accountable, especially in this episode, because Madison was saying that she wanted to have more grace and people to understand her. David was saying, no, Madison finally sees me, while meanwhile, they had neglected the fact that they actually hurt Alan in the process. Michelle, I'm not really listening to. She didn't care about that man. But they still flouted the rules of their own relationship and their own marriage. The question is, why didn't they quit the marriage then? Why didn't they leave the marriage? Why didn't they say, actually, let's leave it and go on to the next one? Well, the reality of the situation is that both parties were looking for control in actually stepping out of the relationship without being outside of the relationship. They could have told the producers. We ain't doing this no more. I don't want to be in this anymore. I found someone who I truly like. But the reality was they were trying to kill two birds with one stone. I'm sure when they went to the producers, if they had gone to them, they would have told them to stay because they need to stick out their contract. And then probably a financial issue would have come in. They would have lost some money. But the reality of the situation is love is seemingly much higher than the value of you getting paid a check for this episode. In fact, they probably would have made more episodes on YouTube trying to find love outside of your marriages. They didn't do that. Why? There's a level of selfishness that was on both parties. But we're going to break it down because I've got clips, I've got parts that I've taken from the show, especially this episode, to really kind of break down what was happening between the two of them. So make sure before you do anything else, you're liking, you're sharing, you are subscribing to the channel, and then click on that bell button for notification of the uploads. And for those of you who are returnees, you already know what it is, baby. You got the middle rows. You got the middle rows. My throat is a little bit dry. All right, let's get into this video because I want to start somewhere where, I saw something I heard something that David said and what she had said. And I said, this is where we need to start the conversation on what actually happened. First and foremost, cheating is wrong. Whether David was in a marriage with Michelle who didn't want him no more, or whether Madison wasn't honest enough to tell Alan that she didn't want to be in that relationship no more. Both of them lied consistently to their respective partners. And actually, they lied to us as an audience. And actually, they lied to themselves. So there was betrayal that was within and betrayal that was outside. But let's go to a clip because this was really interesting to hear this from David.
She was looking past me. She seen who I was for who I am and like how genuine I am and how hard I was trying. So that was like right there. I felt that there was a connection. I was like, and I was like, damn, I could see myself being.
Now, David lets us know that with Madison, she saw right into him. And I think this is part of the reason why people end up cheating. There is something about the other person and what they're doing that makes you feel seen, heard, or understood. Now, irrelevant to the actual issue, it doesn't stop you from being a cheater. But there is an understanding we can come to as to why you actually did it. But this is going to get more nefarious and more darker as the video goes. Because whilst I fully understand this, and I've done this myself, and I can fully testify to some of these thoughts about being understood and seen, there is a nefariousness of you being a robber, a thief, and somebody who steals, because that is essentially what Madison and David both did. And what were they more focused on? I talked about Michelle and her focus, but what was Madison more focused on? Let's listen to what she said.
So badly, I want him to look at me in the eye, and I want to tell him everything that I've been feeling and how I, wish I would have told him the moment that I started to catch any type of feeling. We've gotten to know each other. We spent every single day together almost for the last 6 or 7 weeks. I feel like the worst person in the world right now.
What Madison's focused on, just like David, as we heard David say several times to Michelle, is, I'm a good person. I'm a good person. And look, I'm not going to debate whether you're good or bad. I don't think that's my place to say that, right? It's not about whether you're a good person or a bad person, but the fact that you're focusing on being a good or bad person tells me there are deeper emotional wounds we need to address. Why? Because they're attaching behavior to personhood, right? When you do something wrong, that is not your personhood, right? The world may attach those things. They may say those things about you. They may label those things about you, but your personhood isn't attached to your behaviors, meaning you can do bad things but not be a bad person. But you might be perceived as a bad person. And I think that's where Madison and David are really focusing on. They both were screaming from the hilltops about, I'm not a bad person, I'm still a good person. They believe that even though they've done a bad thing, that they should be viewed as being good people. Now, unfortunately, that's not how the world works. You do something bad, people will judge you based on those bad actions. And then they will label you as good or bad people. And I understand that. But why are they so triggered to want to change that narrative? Well, the reality of the situation is that these are coming from emotional wounded places. We know that with Madison, her and her mother never really had a great relationship. There was distance. There was turmoil. There was pain there, right? Now with David, he seems to have a bit more of an intact unit. But as I tell you all the time about attachment styles, one of those attachments that happens is often anxiousness, right? So an anxious attachment where sometimes, even though it looks like the parents are great, they could be people that were inconsistent in their love and caregiving, and that can breed an anxious person. Now, when we saw David, almost trying to fight for the love of Michelle at the very beginning, but he quickly let it go, I do believe he's got more of an avoidant tendency than actually being anxious. But then, if he could carry both, that would probably make you more fearful avoidant. But that's a video for another day. Let's just focus on the fact that both these parties potentially have a lot of wounds in their past as to why they do what they do. And so that makes them more culpable and more probable to stealing, because that's what they were doing, okay? All right. Now, Madison was so focused about how bad she felt, but did she feel guilty because she actually felt bad about what she did? Or she feels guilty because she will be perceived as a bad person and doesn't want to be perceived as a bad person because that's probably what she's experienced as a child, right? When children go through very traumatic experiences in their childhood, they feel responsible for what they did not do. So if a parent was bad to a child, or a parent abandoned a child, or a parent rejected a child, the child internalizes that and believes that they are bad. And so therefore, it's because of me that the parent doesn't love me, not realizing the parent did what they did because of what they did. That's the projection, and that's the internalization. And so it can be very difficult to fight that particular thought process, even as an adult. And then it bleeds into your adult relationships. Let's listen to this clip here.
And I think that's what is killing me the most. It's he hasn't been able to hear anything from me, and him and I have been the ones that have been through the most. And just hearing how upset he was this weekend, my heart it breaks for him. I don't like feeling.
Now, she talks about how her heart breaks for him and she just hates how it is, etc. I'll be honest with you, most cheaters don't feel that. The guilt that they feel is not necessarily a remorse of hurting you. Usually most people who cheated, the guilt remorse is actually being caught. The guilt remorse is how people are going to view them. The guilt remorse is now you have power over them because now you are going to look at them some type of way. The guilt and remorse, really, the guilt that they're feeling usually is within themselves, right? They feel like they've betrayed you, yes, but they feel a sense of shame and embarrassment that they've got caught, and not only caught, but now somebody has something to say bad about them. Again, the bad child syndrome, right? And again, these are emotional wounds that are carried from childhood into adulthood. But before we go there, let's talk a little bit more about commitment. Because I think with David and Madison, let's be really honest, they were never committed. And I shouldn't say never. Let me say this. They were quickly detached from the commitment that they were meant to have, right? David obviously had criticism, and he was, his partner was contemptuous towards him. This is what the Gottmans talk about, the four horsemen apocalypse, right? And how when you have contempt, criticism, you have stonewalling, and you have, I can't remember the fourth one, right? Basically, that's the quickest way to see how someone's going to end up divorcing. And we saw that in their relationship. But the problem is that David was not brave enough to say that he didn't want to be in this relationship anymore with Madison. I'm sorry, with Michelle. He wasn't brave enough. So he quickly emotionally detached. Now, people who tend to do this, who emotionally detach and then lack the integrity, right, to stay within the commitment of the length of time without first quitting before they actually go into something else by monkey branching, usually there's an emotional wound there. And there's a selfishness in that particular behavior. This is why I have to hold them accountable, right? And so both Madison and David, quite early on in the honeymoon phase, were already starting to have emotional connections by going to the gym and seeing how great they could bond together. The problem with that is they were already starting to detach from their partners. And that quick detachment usually is an indication that there is something deeper that allows you to detach from a relationship much quicker. Avoidancy. And avoidancy really is an attachment style, avoidant, dismissive avoidant. There's also fearful avoidant, but there's also something else within that space. What are avoidants avoiding? Anxiety. What's the anxiety? The anxiety of feeling rejection and feeling abandonment, or feeling like somebody doesn't. Well, I guess I'll stick with those two for now, and I'll deal with the third one. But dealing with that fact of abandonment and rejection, right? Now we saw that obviously David went through rejection. Okay, all right, and we see that with Madison. Sometimes the rejection aspect is not necessarily that kind of wound. For avoidance, sometimes it's a feeling of the fear of feeling trapped. Like Madison, when she saw Alan, her biggest issue was the fact that he wasn't he wasn't so strong, right? She had a big issue about that, and she had a problem with his clothes. It was an attraction issue. Like, let's just keep it a buck. She wasn't attracted to that man, right? And she refused to settle. The problem is that her image and her reputation was far greater, and also she had not the courage to actually open her mouth and say, "This is not what I want." She didn't want to be the bad person. And because both David and her didn't want to be the bad person, what ended up happening is nobody said anything, right? And being a bad person, the struggle with that is, as a child, you being the bad person is what you've probably felt for a very long time, and then it led to mistreatment. So in your head, you're thinking, I can't be the bad person in this situation. I can't say something because I'm afraid of conflict. I'm afraid of it being messy. I'm afraid of having to answer questions. I'm afraid of having people to look at me and my decision and my choice. Right? But that's a lack of courage on your side. That's a lack of assertiveness. That's a lack of confidence that you actually have within yourself that you don't carry. And so both these people, interestingly enough, again, had their major issues. Now, when it comes to the commitment is tested in discomfort. Both of these people were working through challenges. David had Michelle, who just didn't want him, and Madison was dealing with somebody who she wasn't attracted to. Okay, whether it was physically, whether it was emotionally, whatever it was, she was not attracted to. And there's a clip that's really interesting that I want you to watch. Here's what she said.
This is my life, and it's my feelings, and it's my, happiness, and I don't know exactly how the experts are going to approach this, I guess, and my fear is I don't want to be berated.
Now, she talks about this, and I apologize. It didn't play the first.
This is my life, and it's my feelings, and it's my, happiness, and, I don't know exactly.
Now, she lets us know quite interestingly that it's her life, her happiness, and she wants to do what she wants to do. What does that sound like? It sounds like somebody has been powerless their entire life, and they are now seeking power by taking control and charge of a situation. This is what both David and Madison did. They took control of a relationship, but what they did was they did it in a selfish way. They did it in a way that was about, no one can tell us anything about what we're going to do. We're going to do it because I don't want no one to stop us. We're going to do it. And she made, she eloquently lets Carla know that, how do I know what's going to be? How do I know that? How do I know it's going to get to that stage? It's not about knowing. Okay? And here's a clip of this. And she says this. Now, I'll play a little clip for you guys. When you don't know the direction that you should go or that you want to go.
I don't know. I just feel like us all hanging out outside of this experience has also just...
Now, her not knowing where it's going, I understand. We can all understand that. But the problem is that in that space, you're still disrupting your commitment that you have to Alan. And really and truly, if you feel like there's something going on where you're no longer liking Alan, and you weren't liking Alan for a very long time, and instead of actually just quitting that situation, instead of ending it, right? Instead of saying, you know what, I'm not committed to the situation, let me end it. Your fears took over. And your selfishness took over. Your needs were more paramount and needed to be fulfilled more than Alan's. And that is indicative oftentimes of people that have an unbalanced view when it comes to relationships and what they've experienced in life. Usually that's somebody who feels a level of powerlessness and then tries to take all the power back in the decision making. So it's her life, her decisions, her happiness, etc. But that excludes Alan's. And all she needed to do was exit the relationship. Now, David, too, if he didn't care about Michelle and he felt like Michelle, this wasn't a real marriage, why didn't he tell Michelle, can I be honest with you? I got to quit this. And not only that, I'm sure he probably felt to himself, I got to protect Madison. Yes, you do. But the problem is that we're doing something and you need to have integrity. And you need to be confident that actually this is not how I want to start a relationship. This is not how I want to go about things. I value you and I value me enough to say, if we're going to start something, we need to quit our respective situations. If you're not willing to quit your thing, then why am I willing to engage with you? That's why they have to be accountable. That's why they have to be accountable. Because if you really believed in your value, and you believe that what you were doing was okay, which I know you don't, but you believe in your value, you just said, listen, I don't have to rush it. I don't have to jump into the situation now. I can wait. But the selfishness and whatever feeling of a powerlessness that you guys felt took over. You thought about you and you only, right? This commitment, commitment without self-betrayal is in a sense, right? The first betrayal is oftentimes done with yourself. The betrayal that most people feel is with themselves, right? So with Madison, the betrayal would have been when you saw Alan and it wasn't it, and you continued in that relationship and it wasn't working, and you failed, it failed to connect, right? You betrayed yourself by not saying anything, by not saying you had enough and you want to quit this process with him. You failed yourself there. David failed himself and betrayed himself when he failed to speak up and tell Michelle, I'm not in this no more. I'm quitting. Instead, they held their safety nets in that place. Well, specifically more Madison than David, but David still had a safety net because even though Michelle might not like him, the safety net is that you still have a wife in this situation, and actually you are afraid of the carnage that you'd have to prepare for in the confrontation, which is what you're avoiding by having a conversation, right? But then that breeds
on a bad note,
what we call trust.
I mean, listen,
issues.
there's a big part of me yesterday. I was like,
right?
dude, I don't know how I can be around these people after trust, dude. That's what I predict. What kind of trust are you guys gonna have in each other if this is the way you guys?
That's going to bring the trust issues. Because in reality, in that situation, both of you have had to lie and become an actor in that space. Now, this can work if you guys decide to be honest and do the work. But again, like I was saying, a lot of this is to do with emotional triggers and wounds, right? We have the fact that obviously cheating oftentimes comes with proximity. These two were very close in their particular proximity. And so it's not a random person. It is two people that knew each other and had the opportunity to also do it. We know that Madison is afraid of criticism. Right? We know that Madison wanted to explain to Michelle. She wanted to explain to Alan because she didn't want to be the bad person. When in reality, she needs to sit with herself and actually look herself in the mirror and go, why did I do what I just did to Alan and I did to Michelle? David has to look himself in the mirror and go, why is it I did what I did to Michelle when I could have quit and been okay because she didn't even want me?
Isn't an easy thing to put yourself through, and nobody understands what it's like to be put in this situation. I just hope that going into today, the experts, show me grace and compassion, and they can ask their questions.
So she said, "Oh, they can ask that question, but I want some grace and compassion. What for cheating? Most people are not going to give you grace and compassion for cheating, my darling. Right? Same with David. They're not going to give you that grace and compassion, right? And understanding. And both of you want that grace and compassion, and I actually understand it. This is what I'm saying. I'm not lambasting them. I'm just keeping it real. And I'll be honest with you, with somebody who's actually done this before, I'll tell you this now. In reality, you have to come to a place where you understand that no one's going to give you that grace, right? They're not going to give you that grace, and you got to be willing to take it. And that's the sad thing about it. That's the hardest thing about it, right? That's the hardest thing about it. And most of us don't want to sit in that. They got caught. You know what I mean? They got caught. And they're going to have to sit in that. All right? So as I said, betrayal starts with yourself first. And a sense of powerlessness, they are taking back their power. Now, quickly talking about this, boundaries. Infidelity, that begins like this, right? She said, obviously, it's my life, my happiness. I'm doing what's best for me. When you don't express your unhappiness and you don't tell the other person, right, you are robbing them. This is why I said you're a thief. You're robbing them of the opportunity to be able to adjust in the relationship and either continue the journey or even let you go. And see, this is where the actual dark arts really starts from these two, okay? Because the reality is the fear of the confrontation is what kept them in the relationship. The fear of having to speak to both their respective partners is what kept them in this relationship. And the fact that they were benefiting from having the safety net whilst exploring their situation, right? Now, if you know anything about boundaries, avoidance especially have very thick boundaries, whereas anxious people tend to have very thin boundaries. The anxious person is afraid of creating boundaries because they will lose a connection. Avoidance create thick boundaries to reduce the connection, right? Now, what this ends up happening is the need for control and emotional safety. So the avoidance specifically will, for instance, will stay in a relationship and get another relationship outside because they will get their physical or emotional needs met outside of the relationship. So it gives them a sense of control within the main relationship. Now, maybe they need to quit. Maybe they need to get out like Madison does, right? But she maintained control by keeping her external emotional and physical relationship with David outside and not branching over to that relationship. By not quitting the relationship, she still had safety. She had two places that she could rest on, right? David too was still frolicking with Madison. At the same time, the safety of trying to keep the nice guy image. I'm a good guy, but really and truly, he's doing bad things, right? And so they were branching into those relationships while continuing to keep their safety base, right? And what that does is it allows for them to play around without much commitment. You see, had they been committed from the very beginning, they would have had different set of challenges, right? But because both of them are probably even afraid of even commitment, right, that it allowed them to explore their commitment outside without the pressure. A bit like when we say we don't want no labels, but we explore what's going on. I don't want to call it a relationship because we're afraid of the label, and the label meaning that it becomes weighty, and we now have to come to a realization that we're in a commitment. And so they played on that aspect. But again, it's a level of selfishness. It's a level of duplicitousness. It's the actor. It's the liar. It's betrayal. It's the fear. Okay? So when you're failing to end it, you're monkey branching. Okay? Now, we know they weren't happy in the relationships. It's understandable. We get it. We totally understand it. But this is villainary behavior, which now the effects of it will be that they have to start working on trust in a new way in their new relationship. You know? Because at one point, David was like, it's not a marriage for him because of the way Michelle treated him. But it's not about the marriage. It's about the commitment that you issued. It's about the fact that you said that you're going to be faithful and fidelitous within that process. Right? And if you wanted to quit, you could have quit. It's about your silence and you passive aggressively using your actions to stomp your feet and exit without actually exiting, without telling the person you wanted to leave. It's about the selfishness and the robbery of taking. Because that's what they did. They took and didn't want no one to tell them anything. Right? So, final lessons. Okay? Final lessons. Speak your truth, lest you betray yourself. Okay? Speak your truth. If you're unhappy, you want to leave, speak your truth. Stop sticking in a relationship knowing that it's not right for you and then branching outside. You're ruining two relationships because even that new one, that can create trust issues. Number two, trust is earned daily. Okay? So emotional transparency. Look, even if Madison has said to herself, you know what, this ain't a relationship for me, but then said, look, Alan, I want to quit. I can't do it with you, right? She would have garnished Alan's at least respect. And he would have nothing else to say apart from the fact that she said what she said. I can't chase her. I can't fight her. And you have not been the villain, right? Number three, commitment requires growth. Now, I want to say this also because there is an aspect of I've forgotten what it's called. It is called, and I'm trying to remember the terminology of what it was called. I was reading the other day, and it's about there's a word for it, and I'm trying to find the word for it. But anyway, it's a particular theory that I was looking at and I was reading over the other day. And it's about how people want to be in relationships where they're consistently growing and they're evolving. When they feel like they're not growing and they're not evolving, that is where the trouble usually starts from. And I was trying to find it on my notes, but I think I put it elsewhere, right? They want to see that they're growing and evolving. And so when you don't have that, this can be an unattractive space, but you must communicate that. If you want that and you desire that growth, we communicate that in a relationship. And if that's not what we want and that's what's working for us, we quit. We say, this is not for me. I'm communicating that I don't want this, and we leave. The fact that they didn't do that is selfish on their part. And it shows a lack of integrity, but it also shows that they're willing to rob and to steal. And we do those things when we rob and steal when we believe that we don't have resources in our own hands. And that comes back to a self-value and self-esteem issue once more again. So, I want to say this as a final note to as well. Look, cheating is not inevitable. Cheating does happen, but there are people who do these things who are not paying attention to their own emotional wounds. If you don't communicate, you don't talk, you don't be transparent, you will find yourself in these situations. Both David and Madison chose to steal and rather than actually communicate with their partners and quit. Okay? All right? Now, deep emotional wounds or not, you should not be so selfish, and you should also not betray yourself by staying in something that you don't want to stay in. Be brave, be courageous. Yes, that thing might bring confrontation. Yes, people might say something, but at least you've chosen what's true to you. Okay. All right. So if you've seen some of these patterns in your own life, look, this might be a great time to reach out to me. You know, I've got a few spots in my coaching. Reach below in the description box. We'll have to host you guys as well. And let's get the growing, the healing, and the transforming for you guys. All right. But until then, and another video, make sure you guys like, share, subscribe, click on the bell button for notifications of the uploads as well. We'll see you again very, very soon.